Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 90th episode of the Inbox. Starting off with a question from Matt Tortora saying, during the Hawk sale, I melted my Avenger for the Hawk, but now with the Avenger size increase, should I go back to the Avenger or stick with the Hawk? That totally depends on why you decided to melt the Avenger for the Hawk. They're going to do things in different ways anyways. There's no... Because if you think about it, I mean, the Avenger right now is a ship, even in its current size, they can carry cargo, you can carry people in holding cells, you can do some fighting, you've got a bed. You start talking about the Hawk, you don't have the cargo. It doesn't technically have a bed, even though you could technically log out in the holding cell if you don't have a person there. So it doesn't make sense that you would have moved from the Avenger to the Hawk for the size increase. Now, so what you want to kind of then figure out is, why do you have the Hawk and why would you want to go back to the Avenger? Do you see more value in the larger size because it lets you carry more people, or because it lets you carry, cargo if you decide to rip out some of the holding cells? Then great. If you went to the Hawk because you like the idea of the visibility down to a planet's surface and being able to track somebody that way, or the EMP, or the ability to put somebody in the back of the ship, or you like a lot of small weapons, then those are reasons you would keep the Hawk over something like the Avenger. But if you really kind of prefer the idea of versatility over the, specialization of what the Hawk is going to be, then I would absolutely go back to the Avenger. It just kind of depends on why you made that upgrade, and since I don't know what that answer is, I can't really help you a little bit more than that. Next question is from Mermoginek. Okay. Sorry about that. Which vehicles will fit into my Taurus? I am curious if I could carry a Nova for someone or other larger war machines which might get implemented in the future. No. You're not going to fit a Nova in a Taurus. Basically, in the Constellation series, you're going to be able to fit an Ursa, probably the Lynx, the X1, the Dragonfly, the Nox, the Gray Cat, basically anything about Ursa size and down. When you look at the actual cargo bay on like the Andromeda or the Aquila today, the Ursa barely fits based on width. The real change that you're going to see with the Taurus is the length of the actual cargo area. So you may be able to fit an additional Taurus or just more vehicles, or an additional Taurus, an additional Ursa, but you're not going to be able to fit anything that's wider or necessarily much bulkier. So no, a Nova's not going to be bigger. I would say, plan on things like Ursa, Cyclone, that size and around. Digital Master 37 says, you and Nubify are literally my two favorite Star Citizen content creators by far. Thank you. Very kind, and I'm sure Nubify, my fellow Redacted member, is pleased to hear that as well. So he has two questions. Do you suspect that we will see the Polaris this year become hangar ready or verse ready? So we're not necessarily doing hangar ready things anymore. It's basically just ships get in when they're flight ready. So it's really going to come down to whether it's available in the verse or not. I don't really know. I think it's probably going to be close to the end of the year, somewhere in there. So whether it makes the deadline of being, done in December or something like that, we don't really know. I haven't heard a lot about it being rushed through the development cycle. We know that the Hammerhead is moving very, very quickly, and I think that's an important step. Because you're still talking about like an Aegis ship. Well, I guess the Polaris is RSI, so that doesn't really help. Well, let's put it this way. The Hammerhead is being rushed through because I think it's going to be the test bed for larger ship combat in the persistent universe. They can't just drop in an Idris right now and say, this thing is going to just crap out the servers. Let's go ahead and just let people hammer it out. You can put in something like the Hammerhead, which is a smaller ship than some other ships that we currently have in place as far as overall bulk. And it's not necessarily carrying a ton of cargo like something like a Caterpillar is carrying around. So it's a better test bed. So I think getting that in place is helpful, and then it depends on what their next step is. Do they then want to scale up a little bit and move up to the 150, 160 meter Polaris? I don't know, maybe. But I think the one thing that may help is the Idris, I feel like, is getting pretty far along in development, and I think what that means is actually having the RSI capital ship model in place. It'll probably be relatively easy to kind of transition some of those assets down to the Polaris to be able to use, so we'll just have to wait and see. I'm not necessarily counting on it by end of year, but I think it'll be around that time frame. And your other question was, do you think that CIG will release an API for the cargo system so that we can create apps that will share live or close to live data in regards to commodity prices through the verse? Could be fun, or it could be abused as well. I don't know if we're going to necessarily see that. I think what we're going to get is the an app that's actually released from CIG that'll allow you to communicate with your organization mates and actually work on things outside of the game. We do know that you're going to be able to interact with players in the game from an app or from the website and things like that. So technically, I think that's going to be there. The other thing is when you start creating applications, you probably start talking about API. So it depends on what that's actually going to tap into on the actual database side. I don't think they're going to want to open that up. Maybe they do, because maybe you can say, like, I'm about to leave work, I want to see what I'm going to do at home, and then they want to give you the ability to check prices around. But I think what that's probably going to be more likely is they would rather probably utilize players to kind of transmit that information, because it almost creates jobs for people and activities. So I don't think the real-time pricing is going to be displayed elsewhere outside of the game, but we'll see. Jeff Hardy says, do you think the Redeemer should have the bottom widened so it can carry an APC like the dropship in Aliens 2? No, I don't. I think what we have with the Redeemer is a gunship, right? And then it gets the additional add-on ability of being a dropship as well. Gunship first, dropship second. I don't think we want to take a gunship and add mass and add size to it as far as its like signature and actual like cross-section for people to hit you when they're firing at you and probably slow down the ship and make it less maneuverable. I don't think that really fits the bill. Not to mention, I think when you start talking about actual like ship transport, like you want to take like a APC along and you want to take an Ursa along or something like that, I think that falls more into the cargo transport. What you have in the Redeemer is a ship that has good turret coverage and is relatively small, so you should be able to rapidly drop down and insert your troops where you want them to be, as opposed to dropping them off at a further distance and then sending them in an APC. So no, I don't see that happening, and I wouldn't want it to happen either. Stephen lastly says, can we now assign weapon slots freely, like left mouse button and right mouse button? You can't necessarily go into controls and say, I want to use my M4A on the left mouse button and I want to use my, I don't know, like your mass driver on your right mouse button. What you can do, though, is you can use the HUD and actually, like the MFDs, and actually go in there and set weapons groupings the way you want, and it'll display which weapon group is what. Then you can go into your controls and say, I want weapon grouping 1 to be left mouse button, and I want weapon grouping 2 to be right mouse button, and then you get some customization that way. So that's how you can kind of interact with it today, but it's not just by weapon. Johan Armark says, do you know a good long-distance multi-ship or cargo ship that you can solo play and still handle some battle? So I assume when you say multi-ship, you probably mean either versatile or multi-crew. I don't know which way you're actually going there. But the one that immediately comes to mind is the Constellation. Now, it depends. Like, if you're saying that you want to exclusively solo play, then a lot of times the Constellation is going to be a bad bet, unless you start talking about adding in the avionics blades that'll give you some automated firing from your turrets. Then you get a little bit better. But if you want long distance and you want multi-crew and you want cargo and you want to be able to handle some combat, then the Constellation Andromeda is probably your best bet there, assuming you don't mind hiring NPCs or taking advantage of AI blades. If you want to then say, I don't want to do that, I want to make it a little bit cheaper, then what I would say is probably look at the Cutlass Black or the Cutlass Blue, both of which right now, well, the Blue's not in yet, but so basically either way, decent amount of cargo space, they handle well, they're designed well, they've got pretty good weaponry on them, they're relatively durable, they can handle a lot of different tasks. So I would say the Black or the Blue is probably your best bet if you truly want to go at it solo. And our last two questions are patron questions, starting off with Elfwins, who says, based on the information from 10 for the Chairman and the 600i War Bond sale, what do you think how the customization and display of ship names on the whole might work in the future? That's tricky because we've really heard different things in different places, right? Like we've heard that everybody's going to be able to name your ship and it's probably going to display as part of the skin, or maybe it's just part of the information about your ship, so when you scan it, it may pop up and say like, here's STLYoungblood in the Tornado, or whatever I name my ship, right? But it may not actually be a physical asset on my ship itself. And then all of a sudden we start getting into like the 600i Warbond sale, where you can say, I actually, according to the website, now own a 600i with the name of this ship. So if you have an official name like that, then you're probably going to say this is something that will be displayed on the ship, and maybe they limited that in the Warbond sale because maybe artists actually have to build that out as part of your individualized skin on your ship. That sounds tricky, right? And then it all of a sudden says, well, then what's the point of actually having value in doing this elsewhere for free, but it's not actually on the player's ship? So I think this is something they're probably going to backtrack on. I think they may say you can technically own the name of this, but the complicated part is no two people can have the same name for like a 600i right now that did the war bond sale. Now, with that, I'm under the impression that that probably is going to apply to naming your ships in-game as well. I don't like that, because then all of a sudden what you're going to get is there's going to be 1,000 people that want to fly the Enterprise, right? So you're going to have Enterprise 1, Enterprise 2, Enterprise 3, THA Enterprise, the Enterprise, Enterprise X, but it's going to start looking like Xbox gamer tags, right? So I think what they would then probably say is, well, we don't want that either. That's immersion breaking. So let's just say everybody can name their ship whatever they want, and then you'll probably get 35,000 people that have Enterprises, but whatever. Well, if you can do it there, then what differentiates what's actually on the 600i? So I don't think they actually know what they're going to do. I think they're probably going to drop what's on the 600i or make it special and say that it's not going to be displayed on the whole of your ship for everybody. But on this 600i, we will actually build it out so you can have it displayed on the whole of the ship. I think that's the only way they're going to do it to differentiate it. Otherwise, it's just going to be something they're going to have to kind of backtrack on, I think. And the last question is from Silvacar. Says, I'm concerned that so far only one, the Ursa, ground vehicle has life support. Will that become a problem with long-ranging ground travel and the X1 and Nox without cargo room for oxygen? There's going to be other things that are going to be implemented that have life support. You're going to see things like the links coming in as well. But, I would say really outside of the Ursa, nothing really appears to have life support. To my knowledge, the Cyclone is not going to have life support, even though it has a little bit of a rudimentary shield around it. The Dragonfly, the Nox, the X1, none of those are going to have actual life support systems on it. And you're right, the Dragonfly actually has the ability to carry some cargo, and so do some versions of the Cyclone. But, are you talking about just tossing in a bunch of medi pins in like the cargo hold or the oxygen pins so you can keep just stabbing yourself and giving yourself more oxygen? Maybe, and I think players can do that anyways. It depends on what sort of suit you're bringing along. But I think the idea is that it's something that you have to kind of monitor, and ultimately, you're bringing a Dragonfly in another ship to do ground exploration. You're not using that as your primary ship to go around the planet. Like, you wouldn't say, I'm going to circumnavigate Daymar on a Dragonfly. You would say, I'm going to put the Dragonfly in my Cutlass. I'm going to fly 20 kilometers. I'm going to set down. I'm going to drive around in the Dragonfly for a little bit. Then I'm going to get back into the Cutlass. I'm going to fly. My Cutlass is going to pick something up on scanners. Then I'm going to land down and use my Dragonfly to get there. So I think some of that's based on their intention as far as how they think the gameplay is going to work, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see. I do think there are going to be restrictions based on non-life support ships. But even then, the Ursa is going to have some restrictions as well, probably as like fuel and power and those types of things. And eventually it's going to run out of power as well. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. If you guys have questions, let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for more and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.